o nā mai he runga kau ika e, kau tahura ngā wāhine hākina kina o Aotearoa e. Ka huri ake kia rātau, ko whiturangi hia rātau, ko huri kei sua o te pai whakamahumahara e. Haere, haere, haere o tia tura e. Tui a kia rangi nui e tūnei, kia papatu anuku e tapoto nei. Tui a tangata i runga i tēnei hōtaka e.
Ara e tūnei iau kei raru i te maru o tōku mau o puki atua. E tū i te ao, e tū i te pō. Ara, e kei o mai rā ngā wai tuku kiri o wai putu e rere tunu ki mui te arawaro o tōku piri ngā ware. Kai ngā mātau waka o ngā au e toru. Ara mai rā ki te tautoko ta autua wā kei raru i te tā o tōku ware o aro anu i ki te tangata. Koutou e te unga, e no o tāpiti atu, e no o mo'o au, o tia no rā aere tatamai ki te kaupapa o tēnei ata, o tēnei rā, ara ngā wāhine hākina kino o Aotearoa. Uri atu rā kia rātou te tai ekenga e ngaru atu rā ki te wā ingaro. E nui ngā ingoa i waka ua tea mai rā o tia no rā kia rātou, kua nunumi atu rā ki te ao kapakapa, o kui mā, o koro mā, o te pō. A poroporo ake nei kia rātou, uri atu kia tātou, me ki te kaupapa tangata. Ara mai rā, ara mai rā, ara mai rā. Ara mai rā, kia are mai rā i o koutou tārenga ki te wakarongo atu rā ki ngā pū kōrero, ki ngā pū wānanga, ara mai rā ki runga o Rorohiko. Ara, e kā napanapa atu rā, i te tui, i tarapa, i te ui rā ki runga o Rorohiko. Nau mai hara mai, piua te kupu, piua ngā pātai ki runga o Rorohiko. O te hunga e kōrero te atu ki koutou. Nō reira kai ngā mātau waka o te motu. Haere, tata mai, aha koe e noho tāwiti atu. Ki runga ki te whakatairanga o tēnei kaupapa. Arā, ngā wahine hakina kina o Aotearoa. Tākina atu rā ki koutou, tākina atu rā ngā hau e toru. Kia tai mai ki te tautoko te hau tuawha, ara te hau o te tonga, te hau o te wanganu iatara, ara nau mai, haere mai, e rara.
E toka
mi aroha, e toka mi roma, kia mako haite, riri kia mako haite, mua e kei o i te rangi. Tutu a niwini watu. Aupa mai waho nanga, riri ki tā marino, te wanganui atara, i te ao, i te ao, i te po, ha, 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 wio io, ha, 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 ma, taka, taka, ha, ha, o te awa, o te ora, ha, ha, ki te wanganui atara, hai. Nau mai ara mai ngā e ngā autua toru ki te tautoko, te autua wā, te kaupapa, o ngā wāhine hākina kina o Aotearoa. Huri atu, kia rātou ki kui mā, ki koro mā o te pō, i ruku tai atu ki te pō, huri atu kia tatau, i ruku tai ao, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Ricky Swanell aho, no Tamaki Makoto aho. My name is Ricky Swanell and I kind of call Auckland home. At least it's my place of where I live at the moment.
Kia ora, ko Kirsty tāku ingoa, ko Hekurangi tōku maunga, ko Waiapu tōku awa, ko Nukutai Memihia tōku waka, ko Te Pānua Te Uruahi tōku hapu, ko Tēnā Toka tōku marae, ko Ngāti Porou tōku iwi. My name is Kirsty Stanway. My family roots lay on the east coast of New Zealand. I call Auckland home, but I'm originally from Tauranga like Ricky.
Yeah, let's be honest about where we're really from. Although we love calling Auckland our home. We are your joint MCs and absolutely delighted to welcome you to the Sport New Zealand Women and Girls Summit for 2020. This is a Sport New Zealand event delivered by Women in Sport Aotearoa and the Shift Foundation. Thank you so very much to Kura Moia, who Mana whenua, a representative of Te Aotearoa Taranaki Whānui in Te Whanganui Atara for his mihi whakatau today. For those of you that attended the summit at Te Papa last year in Wellington, kura I'm sure will be a very familiar face to you all. Te Aotearoa Taranaki Whānui in Te Whanganui Atara is the kaitiaki of where Sport New Zealand and the Shift Foundation are located, and we acknowledge them. We also acknowledge the Haukainga in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, and particularly Ngāti Whātua or Ōrākei as kaitiaki of where Women in Sport Aotearoa is located and where the national online conference is running from today.
The annual Sport New Zealand Women and Girls Summit is one of 24 commitments that Sport New Zealand made when the Government Women and Girls in Sport and Active Recreation Strategy was launched 2 years ago by Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, and the Minister for Sport and Recreation, the Honourable Grant Robertson. It is the second of 3 planned events in the series being staged in the run-up to the 8th International Working Group World Conference on Women and Sport, being held in Auckland and online between the 5th and the 8th of May 2020. A big thank you very much, ngā mihi, to Sport New Zealand for the support in making this free for learning and networking event. Over the next 3 afternoons, we'll be guiding you through a really exciting mix of digital keynotes, panels, and workshop sessions dedicated to creating positive change and action towards equity for women and girls in play, active recreation, and sport across Aotearoa, New Zealand. We're both very personally excited to be part of such an innovative approach to the summit this year. Of course, COVID-19 has thrown up some unique challenges, but the team has evolved the approach and we're running a national online conference here on this very platform, with physical events being hosted in the region, So a big shout out has to go to Sport Wellington and everyone gathered at the Wellington event today. Kia ora.
So tomorrow and on Friday, official events are also being staged by Active Auckland and Women in Sport Otago. Registrations are still open for these events and you can find more info on the digital hub. We are so delighted as well that there are satellite events taking place around the country in Hamilton, Napier, Gisborne and Christchurch. All events will be dialing into the national online program and then running their own workshops and networking. So good luck to everyone on there on the logistics of that, but it sounds like everyone's doing an amazing job. Each day between 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock, this platform will be running a great live agenda, and we are absolutely delighted to say there are over 980 registered to join us over the coming days. That number has exploded in the last couple of days as well. People are dialing in from not only around Aotearoa, but we've got some international guests as well, so welcome to you all.
The summit is being run under the theme Change in Action. Last year, we looked at why women and girls were disadvantaged. This year, we'll look at how we can make a positive change in the future. The content for the summit this year has been designed by a highly committed and passionate group of volunteers. And at the beginning of each day, we will thank each team for their efforts. They have been working alongside the steering committee and the operations team. So today we start the summit with a day focused on Pillar 1 of the government strategy. It is all about leadership. A special thank you to today's programming team co-chairs, Michelle Hayward and Brittany White, along with team members Fran McEwen, Justine Reid, Tony Marie Carney, Julie Hood, Claire Beard, Esther Bacult, Robert Van Stam, and Anna Donegan. You can jump onto the digital hub to find out more about this team.
There are so many people behind this event, so we also would like to make a special thank you and a welcome to our workshop programming team, Lawrence Green, Robin Coburn and Esther Buckholt, for their meticulous planning of all the workshops over the next 3 days. There's some great stuff planned. And lastly, before we actually get started, a special shout out to Suzanne McFadden and the team at Locker Room for coming on board as our official media partner for Summit 2020. As many of you will know, Locker Room is the only media outlet in New Zealand dedicated exclusively to the coverage of women's sport. And we hope you've been following some of the summit stories so far. So even though we're not seeing each other in person, there are, of course, always still housekeeping things at these events. I don't have to tell you where the loos are because you'd probably have a problem if you didn't know where those ones are in your own house if you're at home. But anyway, there are a few things that we need to go through. You should hopefully have figured out how to navigate in and out of your sessions. Any session you want to attend, simply enter it onto your timeline. If it's a panel or workshop, the tech team will pick you up, scoop you out and sort you into the correct group. So don't worry, we will remind you about what to do again at the time though. There's a Q&A chat function as well that will be available during most of the sessions, unless they're very short or it's pre-recorded. We'll let you know which ones those ones are. But do make sure you jump on, ask us a question with all these brilliant guests we've got coming up. You are most welcome to do that. If you have any technical troubles, don't ask us. We've got live support, thankfully, and we're probably going to need it too. There is a FAQs on the digital hub, so a lot of your questions may be able to be answered there. Otherwise, on the top of your screen, there's a little wee icon, a red icon with a person wearing headphones that can go to the help, and our tech team will be able to sort you out. One other function that we have too is accessing the meeting hub. You'll be able to see those listed as an option to the right, and it will enable you to connect with people separate to the agenda. It's a really great place to make some new connections, and there's of course some online networking later this afternoon from 4 o'clock.
Yes, well, right now we will move into our first official transition. While this may be exciting, it is your first test and Ricky and I's first test as well. So what I need you to do in a moment, and don't do it right now, but in a moment, exit out of this session and go back to your timeline. You'll then need to select session 2, which will feature both the welcome and the update from Sport New Zealand and the keynote address. Right. You've got about 20 seconds to do so. The clock is ticking, so do it now, and we'll try and see you back there very soon.
Inga mana, inga reo, wahini mā, kohini mā, tuta ihi, tuta wihi, tuta wana, tēnā koutou katoa. Inga mate, Susie Simcock, Margaret Hiha mā, haere, haere, haere. Ki te kaupapa o te rā, wahini mā, kohini mā. E aro ki te hā o hene, hōhene. Ko Peter Maskimmon toko inua, ko o te mana hotu o ihi Aotearoa. Nō reira, tuta ihi, tuta wihi, tuta wana. Tēnā koutou katoa. Can I extend a warm welcome to you all to this very important conference? In my mihi, I acknowledge some important leaders that have passed away this year, including Susie Simcock and the recently departed Margaret Hiha. And there are many others I haven't mentioned. To those great women leaders out there, can I say thank you for your contribution, and let us build upon the foundation that you laid. As you know, we held our inaugural Women and Girls Summit last year with a stunning success. It was hugely attended, and we were excited about building on that for this year's event. However, events of March 2020 came around and things changed dramatically. We're very adamant that we still wanted to hold the summit, and recognising the challenges of COVID-19, it made sense to move this online. So here we are 12 months on, and we're all online, and I guess that's our new normal. Can I start this introduction by first acknowledging the challenges of COVID-19 world that we're all living and leading in, and all the associated ongoing stresses and struggles as we try to navigate through these really difficult times. Part of the stress is not knowing how long COVID disruption is going to last, and how we can plan forward with any confidence or assurity. What I do know is the remarkable way that our sector has pulled together and supported each other and working through this crisis. A lot has happened in 1 year, a lot of great progress, but also with many challenges and frustrations and roadblocks. One thing has not changed is the desire and the need to remove the barriers facing women and girls in our sector and in our society at large. The Minister made that very clear in his opening address at last year's summit. He was looking for long-term, generational and sustainable change for our wahine and our kohine. A lot has been achieved, but we know there's a lot more to be done. And our focus now turns to ensure that all the thinking, all the strategy and all the energy is now implemented, is put into action. And that's why I think this summit this year has been appropriately titled Change in Action. Some of you will know that I have recently resigned from Sport New Zealand, and I leave in December. And so this may well be my last public presentation. For me, it is an opportunity to reflect on where we've gone and where we've got to. I think you'll all have your own conclusions on the progress we're making to create a more inclusive society and sector where girls, young women and women have equal opportunity to fulfill their and realise their ambitions and their dreams. When it comes to women and girls, I lead with a real sense of pride at the progress and real optimism for what will be, but also a note of caution about the need to continue to be vigilant, to maintain the momentum and the energy, and to keep actioning our strategies. Hopefully, like me, you are starting to see some sustainable and real change in our sector. When it comes to women and girls, I'm really heartened to see an attitude change. I've seen a lot more conversations now that are inclusive of women. A lot of business focus and the strategies looking forward, including much more focus on the needs and wants for women. And also, I've seen the investment levels deliberately changing to ensure there's more equity for women and girls. A really good example of that for me recently was the recovery budget that we announced, and we were looking at investing in professional franchises and also into national domestic leagues. The conversation I was having with our national sporting partners was not one about men, and let's add some women on. What the conversation was about men and women, and making sure that we represented both of those leagues and those franchises in everything we were doing. To me, that was a different conversation than we might have had 3 or 4 years ago. And I really liked the fact that it was done without thought, and it was done with normalising the fact that men and women need to be equally valued and equally represented in what we took forward. So while it's no time to start congratulating ourselves or taking our foot off the pedal, I think we've got a long way to go, but we are seeing those shifts and the changes that we are hoping. I appreciate and understand that some of you will say that it's probably not enough. Some of you will say it's probably a lot too late, but hopefully the majority out there will be encouraged and heartened and excited by what we're seeing and now what we're experiencing. Because what we know is making real and sustainable behavioural and structural change is tough, and it takes a long time. And ultimately, it is about leadership. Strong, constant, relentless commitment to improving the outcomes for women and girls. And in this, we all need to play our part. Certainly here at Sport New Zealand, our part that we play started with the launch of the government Women and Girls in Sport and Active Recreation Strategy. That was in 2008. It focused on the 3 areas of leadership, participation, value, and visibility. And it came with $12.7 million of new additional money to help make that change happen. We also reinforced that focus on women and girls when we announced our Sport New Zealand 2020 to 32 strategy, which set out to continue to deliver against the 24 commitments of the Women and Girls strategy. I think when we look at some of the aspects of that, if we take leadership as a good example, we know that positive change will only come with increased representation of women and girls in leadership positions. I'm really pleased to say that most of our partners are on track to meet their 40% board gender diversity commitment by the end of next year. While we originally made the 40% target investment dependent, what we also wanted to do was to encourage or force a conversation about the importance and value of diversity and gender diversity on boards. And it's enormously heartening for me that that target has been overwhelmingly received and unanimously supported by all our investment partners. And they're all taking action right now, not because they have to, but because now they know it is the right thing to do. We're also about to launch a diversity and inclusion survey. A research was launched last week to help us better understand diversity in the play, active recreation and sports system. We want to know how people feel about being belong and do they feel included in our sector. This research will continue for the next 4 years and will help us to better understand the actions that we need to take as a result of that research. High performance is also playing its part. High Performance Sport New Zealand has launched 2 major initiatives with $2.7 million funding, all about creating the right environment and opportunity for far greater representation of women in high performance leadership and coaching positions. The Women in High Performance Sport Residency Fund, which places 8 females, leaders and coaches into high performance programs in national sporting organisations, along with a new coach development initiative specifically designed to grow the talent a pool of emerging and future female high performance coaches. And of course, we're obviously helping to deliver and supporting the second Women and Girls Summit as it leads into the IWG conference, which is not that far away. We've also done a lot around participation with our $3 million investment in the innovation and activation funds, all centered around getting young women active and making a real difference in their community. And on the visibility area, I'm really heartened and really excited about now the fact that we've got 3 major Women's World Cup sporting events coming to our country. With cricket, I know it's been deferred, but the ICC Women's Cricket World Cup, the Rugby World Cup in 21, and then leading into the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2023. And add the IWG conference to that, we are putting women and women's sport at the social and political agenda over the next 3 or 4 years, and I think that's enormously exciting. What we do know is that COVID-19 has dramatically impacted everyone in our sector and across the country. Sport New Zealand has been tasked with ensuring that our sector not only survives, but can adjust and grow again, stronger, better, and more accessible to all in Aotearoa. Much of our immediate attention has been looking at ensuring that organisations can survive, that they can stand on their own 2 feet again. But I want to assure you all that we've not lost sight of our goal and responsibilities to women and girls, both in the short term and the long term. We know that COVID has disproportionately negatively affected and impacted women. This is something we are really conscious about and working on all of our interventions to address across everything that we do. In response to COVID, we've developed some key strategies and priorities. You'll be pleased to know that championing gender equity through recovery and the rebuild phase is one of those high on our priorities. It will guide our thinking as we allocate the $265 million to the sector to look at how we can adjust and how we can grow and develop. I think, like many of you, we are seeing COVID-19 as that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create the sustainable and substantial system change we're looking for. We want to make it very clear to everyone, we are not going to invest any of that money in status quo. We're demanding that anyone who seeks recovery investment to make the change, to reimagine the future, to ensure that the changes that they're making now are in order to move to a more diverse and sustainable future. It's the world we want to see and live in, and we're asking people to act today. And so that's where our investment will go, and will continue to strengthen, particularly for young women and girls as we move forward. Overall, I'm really excited about the positive journey we're on. I'm excited by the momentum, and I'm encouraged by the process. But all of this comes with a big but. But we are nowhere near where we need to be. We know we need to keep leading and championing in order to make the changes to inspire generations of young women to seek out their goals and to realise their full potential. It's critical that we maintain our ambitions, that we maintain our focus, and we call it when we see it. If we don't see what we want and what we want to achieve, then we actually all, as leaders, have responsibility to reach out and make that call. We need to constantly check ourselves to ensure that we're working towards making organisations that we represent all of us in entirety and inclusively. The challenge is before us, but I think the call to action is now, and this summit is a really important ingredient to that cause. Hence the theme, action, change and action. I'm proud of the direction that we're heading in, and now it's time for me to step aside and let someone else take up the reins. Our board will be soon appointing and announcing a new chief executive. I don't know if that new chief executive will be a man or a woman. What I do know, it will be appointed by a board and an organisation, Sport New Zealand, that takes gender diversity and the interests of women and girls at its heart. Therefore, whomever takes up the challenge will be well qualified to see it through and guide our sector to a much better place. Thank you for listening to me today. I wish you well in the next 3 days. I hope that you learn a lot, that you'll connect, that you build on the challenges that we've set, that we collectively keep this momentum going, and we really do champion our wahine and our kohine in our sector. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you so much, Peter. Kirsty and I have managed to turn our microphone on this time, so we should be able to thank you properly. It's one little button there, and look, we managed to do it this time. Peter, once again, thank you so much for that really great update. It has been one heck of a year in the sports sector, and I know for Sport New Zealand, but really exciting times happening ahead for the sector and for you personally, I'm sure. So thank you too for your work over the years at Sport New Zealand.
Right, well, we're on to
thank you. Yeah, well done. Enjoy.
Thanks, Peter. Well, it's now our pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker for the day. Mavis Mullins, a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit, is a Māori agribusiness icon and highly esteemed leader across the New Zealand business, public and charity landscape. She will talk about her journey and leadership challenges associated with being a woman in a non-traditional industry. The question and answer function is open for this session, so make sure you send your question in and we will be keeping an eye on those. Tēnā koe, Mavis.
Tēnā koe. Let me just share my screen. Kia ora, can you hear me? Is my screen up, please?
Not at the moment.
Okay. I think
we can hear you and we can see you, so that's a good start, which means everybody at home can too.
Great, great.
Over to you.
Thank you. Kei te mihi nui kia koutou, e ngā iwi, to the first people of wherever we stand, I greet you. E ngā mana, to the special invited guests, and I guess that's all of this audience here today, I greet you. E ngā reo, to the various languages we may speak, I greet you. E ngā hauewha, to those who have come from the direction of the four winds, I greet you. Tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou katoa. So ko waio, who am I? Ko ruahine te maunga, ko manuatu te awa, ko rangi tāne, Ngāti Rangi Nui, me Ātiho Nui a Paparangi te iwi, ko tamaki nui a rua a hau, Te hei mauri ora. My name is Mavis Mullins, and I'm really grateful to be here to share some thinking and hopefully some kōrero with you today. I was kind of asked to share my leadership journey, and it's always good to look back. My journey started in the wool sheds of New Zealand and Australia, but that soon morphed to really understanding the science of agribusiness. People think it's really comical how excited I get about the wool industry and wool. But did you know that wool is a protein? The protein that makes up that wool fibre can be deconstructed and reconstructed into another value add product. You know, that's quite a journey in itself. But it's not we're farmers here in Dunedin, dairy farmers. And we've gone from understanding the fact that that's what we are, really knowing and appreciating that we're safe food producers for ourselves and for our international markets. You know, that puts a different spin on things and a different way of looking and learning. Rural business, we're sharing contractors, sheep farmers, industry trainers, but that has led me into global telecommunications companies, 2 Degrees Mobile, where in 2000 we were given a task to introduce a third mobile network into New Zealand. That didn't happen for 9 years. And in that 9 years, it was about understanding the regulatory environment and making submissions to ensure that there was a level playing field. From land protectors to land settlers, I can vividly recall some of the most boring meetings I've ever been to with my parents and my grandmother around land protection and their very deep and concerned discussions. And a few years ago, I was really privileged to be a treaty settler, a negotiator for rangitane. An interesting experience, not one I'd like to do too often, but certainly so much learning and understanding within that. And then, of course, you know, understanding culture and commerce, and that actually they work much more powerful when they're together, so that you have cultural commerce, that you have culture within commerce. It is a big deal. And so, you know, the leadership journey, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that it's not lateral, it's not a straight line. And in Māoridom, we call that wiwi wawa, where it weaves and winds, you know, so where you think you might be going, you might be in for a surprise, because it doesn't always work that way. I thought it was interesting also to just think about my sports leadership. And I'm not going to call it a journey, let's call it a short tour, and maybe even an accidental tour. But I guess I want to tell you a really funny story very quickly. But in my last year at primary school, I was appointed, you know, the head girl, and that was quite a big deal back in the day, and it probably still is today. But when it came to netball season, I remember going to trials, and I didn't know all this stuff till many years later, but my mother told me that I never made the team, any team. She went into the headmaster, did her nana in there, and lo and behold, I got into the Dunedin South School F netball team. They created the team just because. And there's been some really cool learnings about that. Not always a story I'm overly proud of, but it's still you know, I think a great story when we start to think about sports and the impact and the influence that it has. But I did represent Dunedin in basketball, which was more me. And then once I got into the wool industry, became very involved in the competitive environment of shearing and wool handling. And that is a sport recognised by Spark. I became I've won golden chairs a couple of times. This sounds very and I'm sorry about that. Don't like to be too much in these kind of kōrero, but I guess this is what it has to be. But then ended up as the president of Golden Chairs to help bring forward their 50th birthday celebration and their World Championships, where we had over 30 countries throughout the world participating here in New Zealand with shearing and wool handling. I was the first woman, first Māori, and the first person from out of Masterton to hold that office. And although it was a bit of a deal for other people, it's certainly, it's kind of like it's just something you get on with and do. And because of those things, I've been privileged enough to have been recognised as a sports administrator within the Māori Sports Awards, and to Dick and Desiree and the amazing work they do in ensuring, that profile and that pride remains front and centre. But of late, last 3 years, I was appointed an independent director onto the Hawke's Bay Rugby Union, and have thoroughly enjoyed that part of the journey. And not to brag or anything, but I'm sure you all know that we are actually holding the Ranfurly Shield right at this very moment. And I know our guys will be working really hard to hold it a little bit longer than perhaps it's been able to rest in other provinces. So, the sports leadership has been a bit of a short tour, but there's some lessons that I'd like to think that have parallel messages. One of the things I think, if I can share one big lesson, it's to know your true north, know you. And the interesting thing about, the Northern Star is that it actually sits directly above the northern axis of Earth. So the reality is we don't ever see this North Star, but we often reference it. And when I have looked at it, actually that Northern Star isn't just a bright star. It's actually a hub. It's a core, and you go out from it, there's a hub. That's how it's kind of reflected here in New Zealand. And that just makes so much sense to me, that you know your core, but you step out, back in, step out, back in. This is where all the learnings and all the magic lies. But there's 4 key principles there for me. The first one is know yourself, know me, know what you love. And then, if you haven't found it, just keep exploring, because it'll be out there. And the more exploring you do, the more you start to understand exactly where your true north lies. It's about being strongly values-based, because, that becomes your anchor, regardless of any drama or activities or situations you get faced with. Those values ground you all the time. I think it's also really important to understand that everything you do creates an impact, and you might think you might have planned what that impact might be, but there's also those potential unintended impacts. So it's always really, about being mindful about the impact, good and not so great, that you may be putting out there. And then the last thing in that whole knowing me thing is about using all your senses. I did talk to Suzanne McFadden from Foot Locker or Locker Room, sorry. And, we talked about how you think with your head, feel with your heart, but trust your puku. That gut feeling sometimes, and you potentially put it aside. Actually consider it, because not hearing everything doesn't always come with your ears. Hearing someone, hearing something can come with your eyes, can come with your heart, with your puku. So just things to think about. The second area really is about people matter. People matter every time coconut. And for me, I like to call that mokopuna decisions. The decisions I make now aren't about me, it's about the next generation. And that's one of the beautiful values within Māoridom, is that you get that opportunity to plan long. You can plan, intergenerationally, because that's just how we do it. And when you have those long plans, it gives you a real sense of freedom, because then it allows you to accept that not everything may happen the way you plan it to happen. And that it also allows you to accept that not everything will always go well. In fact, plan for it not to go well. So, people matter. The third thing, and I guess this is my, my farming roots, but our environment, our natural environment has a voice. And when we think about issues around climate change and extreme weather events, this is Papa Tuanuku saying, I'm not really happy. I'm unhappy at the moment. And so, that needs a response. So let's just never forget that. That's a big Northern Star for me. And the last thing is about the greater good. When I think we work for greater benefit, whether it's our mokopuna, our whānau, our communities, our codes, our business, when you're working for that greater good, there's a greater sense of achievement, there's a greater sense of purpose. So, those are the kind of things that for me are my Northern Stars. And, in your journey, it's really important for you to know where yours are as well. And others may come and some may go, but just always be very directionally focused, because those are the things that will ground you in whatever journey you're taking. I just thought I'd put this up, a bit of a name dropper here, but these are some of my I shouldn't say old, but some of my heroes, sporting heroes, and some of the amazing things they've gone on to do. By the way, if you've got, if I've spelt transferability wrong, well, forgive me about that, but it's not in the the spell check. So I'll leave it at that. But, you may start your journey, but look at some of the journeys that your heroes are starting to take and moving and opening doors as they move. It's a fabulous journey to watch as people start to move through. I thought I'd just share with you some of the things that I'm currently seeing at the moment. What I am seeing is that there's a lot of latent potential out there within women and young girls. There's just so much latent potential. And I really appreciated Peter's opening comments. But, to be quite frank, where I've been, I've seen that barriers to women, they're still there. They might be a little bit more subtle, but, they're still there. And in some places they've strengthened. So that social inequality, let's not fool ourselves that it's getting better, because I'm not really sure that is the case. The other thing I'm seeing is there's greater expectation of women from women. And in the past, I guess the gatekeepers, we've kind of imagined they're not other women, but, there's evidence of that as well. And I guess as we go through our journeys, let's be sure that we're the kind of leader that holds the ladder down, that doesn't pull the ladder up after you. Let's make sure of that. With COVID and just the geopolitical stuff, there's so much greater uncertainty and anxiety. And I truly believe that, women probably face that as mothers, aunties, often providers, whatever, it's a big deal, taking care of our men. And I know, our men don't always like to hear that, but that's the reality. As women, we kind of tend to be natural nurturers, some of us better than others, but, those, when uncertainty hits, this is where sometimes we are able to step up. I just wanted to raise this one about tokenism versus opportunity. I've been told more than once, well, you're lucky, Mavis, you tick more than one box. You're Māori, you're a woman, you're rural. And, with a kind of implication that there's elements of tokenism there. And I'll tell you what, I don't mind, because I think to myself, I'll take any opportunity I can get, and then I'll prove to you I'm more than that. And, you know, so I know that some people get offended, some people get a little bit uncomfortable with what's often blatant tokenism. Hey, I say grab it and go. Don't be afraid, just grab it and make it yours. Indigenous women's voices are being felt, not just here, but globally. And that's an exciting kind of opportunity as well. And the other thing that I guess we're starting to see is our young people aren't always well pleased with what they see, the environment that they're coming into. But I say that with also saying that sometimes I'm not overly thrilled with what they're doing either. So, I guess that balances it out. But I wanted to just, I put these photos in of Sarah Goss. So, some of you may know, some of you may not, but Sarah is also quite a world famous sheep shearer as well. She's been one of the few women who have graced the Golden Shears stage as a finalist. She was amazing in that as a sport, and I'd like to think she's been able to take some of that learning with her in her role in the Rugby Sevens code. We're all very proud of Sarah, as I'm sure a lot of people are of their whanaunga as they step their way through. I talked a little bit about this, but I just want to, emphasise it again, and again, if that's a spelling mistake, hope you'll forgive me for that, but the mana of indigeneity, it's a big deal. And when you see a lot of our codes, there's great Māori participation, especially in teens, whether it's rugby, netball, basketball, hockey. But once we get to those elite teams, we seem to have lost maybe 80%. And I'm going, what's going wrong? What's not happening that we can help bridge some of these very talented individuals? And could this be part of the solution of the social challenges that a lot of Indigenous peoples face? This could be world-changing. If we can do it at home here, it can be done anywhere. So, I just kind of put that. And again, it was lovely to hear Peter acknowledging Margaret. She was a wonderful woman and a great athlete, and it's always very sad when we lose someone of that ilk. But look, I'm just about ready to wind this up because I'd like to be able to answer and engage with you online. But I want to just ask some questions. I want us to challenge ourselves. How might we support our aspiring and current women leaders? We kind of think they're there and they're okay, but are they? As a woman leader myself, it's a very lonely space. And there is a real need to ensure that we have those support networks for our young women as they're moving through, but also those current leaders. Let's make sure we don't forget them. So how might we do that? The next thing, how might we smooth the transitions and facilitate opportunities for those who want and need? And as I work through, in my business world, I'm always looking at these kind of opportunities to help transit individuals from wherever they are to wherever they want to be. The next challenge is how might we execute greater influence in local and global environments? And I'm not talking about big deals. Sometimes the greatest influence comes from the smallest of actions, the smallest of words. Let's think about that one. And then the last one that is quite, feels quite important to me as well is how might we deepen whole of life support and alignment for our athletes? I've seen sporting careers can be fickle and they can be, 1 minute you're in, next you're out. Are we ensuring that we support whole of life, not just within that magical moment of sportsmanship or elite sportsmanship? So I'd like you all to take away at least one of those challenges. Think deeply about it and say, what am I going to do in this area? What can I do? And I'm sure we can all do at least one thing. So with that, look, I'm really happy to take any questions, any comments, and again, just want to congratulate you all for being on this program, and congratulations to you, Peter, for everything you've done to date, and all the very best as you move to your next exciting journey, I'm sure. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Mavis. That was a very beautiful and thoughtful. Us. This one reads, Kia kaha, Mavis. Great to see Danny Burke representing.
Thank you, Kay.
From Moana, mana of indigeneity, #love it, sharing with such grace and dignity.
Oh, thank you, Moana.
Tēnā rawe atu koe, Mavis. Love your honesty.
Is that about the spelling mistakes?
Next one, Kirsty Sharp. Ka pai, your honesty is acknowledged, Mavis. Barriers and discrimination are still very much alive.
Mm.
Mavis, one thing we've sort of heard you speak about is the many, and we see from your career, you've walked in so many different worlds, and you have to walk in so many different worlds. So during that time and through your leadership journey, I can't believe I just used the word journey, but anyway, have there been times where you have had to pull back one part of yourself to promote another part of yourself, or where you've had to take an edge off to be able to fit into a certain world, if that makes sense?
I think what you're asking is, how do you kind of fit yourself? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, because sometimes you see situations where you're too Māori, you're too woman, we're too this, we're too that, and you're walking in so many worlds at one time.
Yeah, and again, it's one of these things where I'm nosy, I'm curious, I'm interested in people, and for some reason, and that's what I say, your leadership journey takes you, no,
we're all doing it.
It's a bit like pivot, isn't it? But that pathway, you might plan it, but it has its own it's got its own energy. I mean, who would have thought when I was in the sharing sheds that I would end up as a director on 2 Degrees Mobile? Really? Good grief. But my love for the Māori economy, or my excitement, not love, because it's that excitement about the Māori economy, the opportunities that kind of brings, all of a sudden you find yourself in places that you never thought of. And do you know what? Every one of those places, yes, levels of uncomfortableness, heck yeah, but learn to like it and make it a learning place. What am I going to learn out of this? What have I got that they don't have that I can bring to it? And yes, Danny Burke's part of that.
We've got another question here, Mavis, from Tēnā Enoka. We are seeing some significant drop-off rates for girls in the mid to late teenage group in basketball. This group faces a great deal of social challenges that keep them from continuing on their basketball journey. How do you see this challenge? How do you see this changing, sorry?
Yeah, and this is, this is not just basketball, but yes, it's in all of these codes. And you see the investment that the government they see the potential. They see that there's an outcome that's possible through sport, through supporting. It's about, again, being in a place of influence at the right tables to actually help steer and highlight some of this. When I first got onto the board of Hawke's Bay Rugby Union, I had a couple of my daughter's friends ring me saying, "Hey, Mavis, that's fabulous, but our little boys won't play rugby because we don't like what we see on the field or off the field," which made me, I had to take a breath, But when I took that to the board table, they kind of said, well, what does that mean? You know, and so my lens was able to say, who takes these little girls and boys to their rugby practice? Who takes them to rep practice? Who washes the jerseys? You know, who actually makes the decision on what they will play? It's not the dads, it will be their mums. And so, you know, by having these, our woman lens at the right tables, I think can play a big part in helping form that bridge between kind of that talent, but then that commitment for the next step.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Mavis. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you for informing us and for challenging us as well. I'm sure we can all take some key lessons out of that kōrero. And congratulations on winning the Ranfurly Shield.
Kia ora. Thank you very much. And no, well done, you two. I'm just so admiring your technological skills. Kia ora.
You've probably put the mockers on us. Thank you, Mavis. Right, everyone, we are going to go, because we have got a technical part coming, we have got a second official transition coming up. So this time we are going to give you a little bit more time. You've got about 5 minutes to move between sessions, but what we would suggest is that you go out, get into your session now, then go off and make your cup of tea or whatever it is you need to do, and then get back to your timeline. Then you'll choose the leadership panel session. That's where we're up to. We're already running a little bit late. So the leadership panel session, when you enter that, you'll see the panelists on screen. You'll be greeted by Robin Coburn, our facilitator. So, right, you've got about 4 minutes. Away you go, and we'll see you back shortly.
Good luck.
Whanganui Aotearoa kei lumen o e mahi ana, nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good afternoon, ahi pai. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm here in Te Whanganui Aotearoa and on the land of Te Aotearoa Taranaki Whānui, which is home to me and also to Sport New Zealand and the Shift Foundation. Greetings to everyone. We've got a fantastic panel this afternoon focusing on leadership, and I think one of the really exciting things about this panel is the range of perspectives that they bring. You've heard from Mavis Mullins presenting on her impressive leadership journey, her values-based leadership, and how she stayed contemporary and current in a changing context. And we're pretty excited to have some people who are also showing leadership in a range of different contexts, bringing a range of different experiences and encouraging diversity in leadership. By the end of this session, you will not only have heard from some inspiring people, but also have a range of ideas and examples that you can apply in your own context. I'm going to briefly introduce you to the panel so you know who's here, and then we'll launch into the first set of questions. So first, very enthusiastic welcome to Hannah Chapman-Carr, who's an up-and-coming professional in the recreation industry and chair of Generate. We've also got Alana Irving, who's a thought leader and entrepreneur who reimagines leadership and organisational structures for a collaborative, diverse and inclusive paradigm. She's currently founder and executive director of the Open Collective Foundation. The bloke amongst, but it's kind of interesting when I looked at the androgynous names of Bernie, Joe and Robin, that that's kind of an interesting feature too. Andrew Corkle joined Sport Waikato as a Regional Sports Trust General Manager a few years ago and currently is leading the People and Communities area. Talofa lava to Bernie. Bernie Tovio is the General Manager for CLM Community Sport, who's a significant delivery partner for the Auckland approach to community sport in Counties Manukau. And last but by no means least, Joe Cribb, who was the previous Chief Executive for the Ministry of Women and Deputy Children's Commissioner and now works both in New Zealand and globally as a consultant. So that's our panel, and I've asked the panel to respond to a pretty broad question really. Who are you, what leadership means, and your leadership journey? So sit back, relax, and we'll take you on a little story of people's leadership journey, and I'm going to invite Joe to start us off.
Oh, kia ora koutou, and thank you, Robin. And welcome to all of you who have joined us for this fantastic group of people on the panel today. Can you imagine being asked, who are you, as a question? I know I sat there and went, who am I? And I think it really does depend on who I'm talking to or what hour of the day it is. So you can see here from my background that it isn't a highly professional studio. It's a messy den at the bottom of our house, and I'm hiding there because it's the school holidays and there is things happening in the kitchen that involve cakes that are going to mean the kitchen will never look the same again as my daughter and her friends create mischief up there. So when you ask me who I am, I'm probably going to be a kitchen cleaner all evening to try and get chocolate cake off probably the ceiling even. And then I'm also a neighbour to some fantastic people. I also am potentially a friend. Hopefully I am a friend, a wife, a daughter, and a whole range of things. So that who am I question is a really hard thing. But I think the second part of the question is slightly easier, which is, what does leadership mean to me? And I thought about that, and often I perhaps thought, and particularly in my earlier stages of my, what I would say, formal career, that leadership was a business card thing, right? So that you had to aspire to a leadership position. You got a business card if you were really good. You even got a car park. I'm not sure if that still happens anymore. And that leadership was equated to some sort of role that you applied for and were given. And I guess as I have aged, is that or matured or understood what leadership means, I think we should disentangle those two things. a leadership role, or being a member of a formal leadership team, or being seen as a leader in your organisation isn't necessarily a proxy for actual leadership. And for me, leadership is this feeling, and I wonder if you've had it too, this slightly uncomfortable knot in my stomach when I am stepping into a space, or when I can see that something needs to be done and I look around and it's probably me who's going to either go there or influence others to go there or gather people to go into that space. And so it's kind of that sense of putting yourself out. Now, that may happen in a workplace context, but it may happen on the street when you see something that's not okay. It definitely happens in our parent roles and all the interactions that we're in. So for me, it's like a call, if that makes sense. And it's usually a wee bit uncomfortable, like a kind of knot, if that makes sense, a physical feeling. It's seeing that space and then having the courage, energy and determination to go into that space. Because usually if you see the space and you're feeling uncomfortable about it, it's going to be hard, and there's not a lot of other people running to get in there either. So, and if you honestly ask me, some days I wish I didn't see that space or got that tummy feeling or didn't hear that call, because my life would be a wee bit easier. But actually the true satisfaction comes from, I guess, that piece of integrity of seeing the call and stepping into it. So that's what leadership means to me. And my leadership journey has been about finding the courage and the voice to actually listen to that call and step into the space. And that doesn't mean necessarily taking jobs, formal jobs. It actually means, I think, hearing the call of leadership and stepping into it. So it probably sounds very vague, but that's I probably started 20 years ago, incredibly with concrete. Leadership is this. It's part of a hierarchy, and it's a role, and you get a business card. And as I've matured, I think that's not necessarily right. So, Robin, I'd be really interested to hear what the other panellists, how they define leadership as well.
Thank you, Jo. I particularly like your conversation about a knot, and we're going to cover that later on when we do networking. We're going to share our knots. I think that's a great example. So let's hear now from Bernie.
Thanks, Robin, and thank you to everyone that's tuned in. Talking about knots in the stomach, I don't know, Robin, you did mention that maybe by doing it through Zoom it might be a lot easier because we can't visually see people, but actually knowing that we've got a whole lot of people in an audience of hundreds, I don't think it makes it any easier. So I can relate to the knot there, Jo. Talofa lava. My name is Bernie Tawio, Bernie short for Bernadette, a real Catholic name. I'm the General Manager for Seattle Community Sport in Counties Manukau. I guess in terms of putting in context who I am, I need to share where I am from. I'm first generation New Zealand born Samoan. Both my parents came to New Zealand in the late 60s. My father is the oldest of 10 siblings. I am the oldest and only girl with 5 younger brothers. I'm a proud mum of 4 children aged between 11 and 29, and I'm super blessed to be a nana of a 4-year-old going on to 14 independent granddaughter. As a Samoan and being the eldest in the family comes with responsibilities, whether you like it or not. The only way to escape that is if you literally escape and run away from your family. Otherwise, you're stuck with it for life. And I guess for me, this was the beginning of my leadership journey. I'll just go in terms of a bit about my background. I started working when I was 13 so I could help out our family in terms of finances. Considered myself to be a good girl, obliging, a hard worker. Became a prefect in 6th form, head girl in 7th form. Looking back, I realised I knew I was smart, I was clever, a natural born leader, but never really realised the full potential that lay in front of me. I was just consumed with the reality of everything that was happening, my culture, my family, my religion and faith, the financial struggles and pressures on my parents that going to university and undergoing, the ideal pathway in life was never really an option, never to be considered. My working background is within the public sector, 10 years employed within the sector, working up the management ladder, learning everything I needed to know proving myself, going above and beyond so I can get up to that senior management position within the organisation. I was the youngest manager that had been appointed nationally within this public sector. Many staff development opportunities I undertook along the way. And I think one that I fondly recall was doing a 2-year part-time study for New Zealand Institute of Management, certificate in supervisory management at MIT. I was completing first semester. I was 8 months pregnant, ready to sit an exam. I was still working full-time at that point. Had my second child, went back for the second semester, and life just carried on. And I guess I share that because that's the reality of the environment that I grew up in. And as much as university and undertaking further study would have been the dream, that just wasn't the reality. So I guess my pathway in terms of leadership was probably not as conventional as others that might be sitting around the table. I then went into business, 15 years, contracting back to the public sector that I'd worked for, plus a couple of other organisations, having provided a number of employment opportunities to many people, helping to make the difference in their lives and the lives of the people that we were there to serve. Also along the way, held several roles on governance boards, committees across many sectors, health, education, justice and sport. And all those opportunities have really moulded me to be the person that I am. So I guess leadership to me, it's all about people. It's about how I, as an individual, interact and influence, motivating others towards achieving a mutually beneficial outcome, an objective or a purpose. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you, Bernie. A really interesting counterpoint, but we're starting to build up the mosaic of leadership journeys and what it is to be a leader. Let's hear your story, Andrew.
Yeah, kia ora koutou, everyone. Obviously a very different leadership story and development story than Bernie, but actually some good parallels as well. So I'll introduce myself properly. Ko Taranaki ta maunga, ko Wakato te awa, ko Ingarangi roa, ko te rana na iwi, ko Pierce na hapu, no matamata aho, ko Kirikiri roa, Hamilton, tako noho enaine, ko Sarah, toko hoa wahine, ko Blake, roa, ko Taylor a maua tamariki, ko Andrew Corkle, toko ingoa, nō rewa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I was born in Taranaki and I grew up in a rural matamata on a dairy farm. So my childhood involved a lot of physical activity. Farm work, running, tennis, rugby, but then my journey as a rangatahi was more of a cruise. I put cruise in rabbit ears, to which today I have, I guess, a lot of regrets about. So I stopped participating. I was the non-participant. I embodied the mystical drop-off. I wagged mandatory events and I lost all my confidence. I lacked opportunity and direction in sport and active rec, and that flowed into my studies. So don't get me wrong, I lived a really privileged and I guess easy life, but a very sheltered one. Didn't leave the farm much. My pathway choices were either farming or university. And my dad made me go to university because I think he thought the journey of 30 years hard farming graft with no help, no breaks like him wasn't the life that he wanted for me. Diversity and inclusion, so topics of the next couple of days were never words in my vocab, and I'm still very much learning in that space as I navigate my own leadership pathway. For me, it was moving to Hamilton for university 17 years ago. That was the eye-opener. It felt like the big smoke. And the opportunities that I've had since university through my employment have broadened my own horizons and shown me how diverse society is and the value of that diversity. Hamilton has undertaken huge population growth over the time that I've been here. And in my work across 3 local government organisations in areas like town planning, parks planning, asset management, property and facility management, I have felt like I guess I've been at the forefront of planning for some of that population shift. Planning, but also reacting, because that's what we tend to have done as well. My time in local government gave me the opportunity to explore more formal leadership roles, and now I'm employed by Sport Waikato. So the other side of the fence, where I've been for the last 4 years as general manager, responsible more for teams delivering health contracts and into tamariki settings. So I'm really thankful for the leaders that I've been inspired by along my own leadership journey and those that have backed me to succeed in roles that I was in absolutely no way a specialist in. And I describe myself now as an excitable generalist. I'm easily distracted and fairly removed from technical operations, but passionate about the organisations I'm associated with and the positive change that they and their people can affect within the Waikato communities in which we operate. So in terms of my own leadership style and beliefs, I'm a big advocate for empowering others and growing those in my teams to succeed in their careers, whether that be within or outside of the organisation that I'm in a more formal role managing them within. So I was told really early in my leadership journey, this is through councils, that you can't be mates with your employees. This was by someone in a leadership role, a formal role, that was a bit more hard-edged than myself, and I've worked really hard to buck that trend. I enjoy balancing the need, I guess, to manage and lead from the front, whilst also being a peer and often a friend. Have learned that that's actually what I need to be inspired in my job and to feel fulfilled in what I do. So it's just become a part of my own, I guess, leadership practice that I own, instead of a practice that I try and avoid and shy away from. So I hope that's been a bit of insight into my background and into where I am today.
Kia ora, Andrew. Thank you very much for that introduction. And so there's more to life than farming, huh? There's a lot of leadership, I think, self-leadership that goes into that rural lifestyle. And how do you kind of motivate yourself on a daily basis? And that is something that I think Alana, who sees green fields over every fence, will tell us a little bit more about that.
Kia ora, everyone. Thank you for having me today. Yeah, it is a bit of a hard question to be asked who you are and what is leadership, because these are huge topics. But for me, I think it actually goes back to being a kid. I think I was born with some natural leadership ability. And so, anytime I show up in a situation, I'm immediately looking for, how can people be working better together? How can we achieve, our collective goals here, and have lots of ideas for that? But always in kind of a weird way, because I was never that interested in being a boss and the telling people what to do side of what some people think leadership is. So my mom likes to tell a funny story about how on the playground, I wasn't out there sort of bossing kids around. Instead, I was trying to organize them into a democratic process to vote on what game we were going to play. And of course, that didn't go that well, but that's kind of shows my approach, I guess you could say. So I got a bit older, and in my early 20s, I ended up working in London at a big corporation with a big skyscraper building and everything, and kind of saw the future of what climbing that sort of corporate ladder and getting higher and higher in the hierarchy would look like. And at the same time, I was involved in organizing a lot of volunteers around arts festivals and stuff like this in environments where there was no hierarchy and we had a lot to get done. And I was just so much more interested in that other environment where, okay, I can't tell you what to do, but we're here to figure out how to work together and get a lot done together and all get going in the right direction. And so I decided to leave the corporate world, went on kind of a journey of discovery. It took me a while. I was seeking more meaningful work, positive impact work, and also this other kind of approach to, I guess, you would say leadership. And I really found it here in Wellington, New Zealand, where I've been living for about the last 10 years. I got involved with a cool network of people called Inspiral, which are social entrepreneurs trying to do business for positive impact and working in a very kind of decentralized, no hierarchy sort of way. And it was a huge learn by doing experience. And along the way, I really found my niche and my passion, which is developing both cultural and software technology to help people work in really collaborative ways. Cultural technology being like facilitation or processes, and software technology being tools for decision making or dealing with money together. And at the same time, I developed some really interesting and new ways of thinking about leadership, some frameworks to think about leadership is more than just, the boss standing on the stage in a black turtleneck telling everyone how it is. I developed something called full circle leadership, which has 8 different types of leadership, and of which visionary leadership is only one. And I found that the other kinds of leadership, such as sensing and inquiring, and then also things like maintenance and operationalization, these are types of leadership. And there are people, especially I have found young women, for example, who have job titles like coordinator or administrator, but actually they're the force behind the scenes that's making everything happen. Sometimes someone like that will come to a workshop and be like, I never thought of that as leadership. I am a leader. And that's sort of the most satisfying thing for me, to say, hey, if we diversify our idea of leadership, we can build more people up as leaders and actually do this in a shared way, and achieve way more together that way. Thank you.
Excellent. And Alana's given us a little peek into the next series of questions. But before we go to those, Hannah, let's hear a little bit about you. Your time in leadership is shorter than some of the others, but no less inspiring.
Thank you, Robin. And it's been so inspiring hearing everyone else's stories as well, because I'd only read everyone's bios. Kia ora and good afternoon to everyone who's listening. As Robin has previously introduced me, I'm Hannah Chapman-Carr, and one of my main leadership roles is the chair of Generate New Zealand. So just quickly, if you haven't heard of Generate New Zealand, it's a network for up-and-coming young professionals, people who are new to the industry, or people who have recently changed careers and are starting out in the sport and recreation industry. And so part of what has led me into leadership has been passion. So I've always been passionate about supporting others and providing opportunities for other people, because I've found that I've been given several opportunities myself, and I always believe that I want to be able to give back to others. So as an emerging leader in the industry, one of the things I found interesting is that term emerging leader. So at what point have you emerged? Is it when you have reached a certain age? Is it when you have X amount of experience under your belt? Is it the qualifications? Is it the number of people you manage? Is it awards? That's one of the things that I always struggle with and still trying to get my head around. But I think when you look deeper into leadership, it's, for me, how you demonstrate it. So how you put your leadership into action. So leadership can be demonstrated in many different contexts. And for me, I've become an industry leader. So I have got a role as the chair of Generate. I'm also on the board of Recreation Aotearoa, and I'm also on the board of World Urban Parks. So for me, it's actions. And so those actions are through advocacy, support, putting others first, and being humble. I always thought when I was growing up that you had to be the loudest or the bossiest or the person that everyone noticed the most to be a leader. But as I have grown through my career, I have found that there are several different forms of leadership, as Alana has said. I think one of the challenges of being a young leader is the perception. So quite often people do think that you're too young or that you don't know enough. But I would say to anyone out there, just keep trying. And there are certain organisations that are really looking for new and fresh perspectives from young leaders. There is a lot more intergenerational dialogue now, which is really good, and it supports the development of up-and-coming professionals, and that's something that we need to be conscious of, is the succession. So being able to support young leaders helps build up the pipeline of leaders for tomorrow. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you very much, Hannah. And I'm glad you raised the issue of emergent, because in fact, if we weren't developing, we wouldn't have emergent roles and skills. So we're all emerging at all times. And it's good for you to be challenging the labelling of younger leaders as being emergent. Great provocation there. So what we're going to do for the next period of time is I've asked people to be really tight about this, but to provide one model or tool that our panel have found really useful as leaders, and an example of where they have applied this in practice. And just to keep you as an audience on your toes, we're going in a randomly different order than the one before. So we're going to start off with Bernie, who's sharing her leadership model and how she has applied that.
I guess growing up in a Christian family, and a Pacifica one at that, values were really, really important in terms of how we were perceived by other family members or within our community. So I would probably describe my leadership style or preference in terms of leadership style as a servant-based leadership approach, which is really to lead through service, to walk the talk, to roll up the sleeves and just get in there and muck in and do the work. But along the way, just remembering to take the people with you or take your team with you. Quite often you see where you want to go, you see how you think you want to get there, and you want to rush to the end, and you have to remind yourself that there's a team around you, and it's ensuring that they're on the same pathway to getting the mahi done. For me, leadership has been a lifelong journey. As you heard my story, went and worked and started a family, as well as started climbing the leadership management ladder within the public sector. Along the way, I guess I just took advantage of the opportunities within the workplace setting for professional development, to undertake the opportunities to study, to do the short programs or training opportunities that were available to help expand my own understanding of how to become an effective leader. Moving from a public sector environment where it was pretty hierarchical, you did what you had to do, it was pretty dictatorial, and now moving into this environment where we've got a semi-flat structure in terms of our own organisation setting, and looking at more of a distributed leadership approach to sharing the workload within our workplace. That's been quite challenging, because I've been used to sort of a hierarchical structure where I'm the boss, I'm the leader, and this is what we need to do, and let's all go there, and often find yourself kind of going there and looking back to figure out where is everybody. And so that's been a huge learning journey for myself. And one of the things that I had to take responsibility for is recognising that and identify ways that I could develop my leadership abilities so that I could be more effective in leading my team to get to the end result where we all want to get to. So I've decided to invest some time in leading self and undertaking a Leadership New Zealand Lead to Transform program over a 5-week period, which allows me to share my own leadership challenges with like-minded people, but also sometimes the solution is actually not within my immediate realm. It's often through the eyes of other people that I'm able to share that journey along to get where I need to. So for me, what's really important is it's never too old to learn. It's important for me to be able to lead from the front, as well as I think it's really important to have someone that you trust who could be a positive role model and a mentor for you in terms of your leadership journey, because you can get quite stuck if you don't have someone that you can trust, or that it's a safe space to be able to share some of your things, the things that you're kind of encountering along the way.
Excellent. Thank you, Bernie. And I'm sure that you've created a very trusting environment with the team of people that you are working with. You've talked about a hierarchical structure, and Andrew's going to talk about a pyramid. So I've no idea if there's a link there, but tell us about your leadership model, Andrew, and how you've applied it in practice.
Yeah, look, not my pyramid, a guy called Patrick Lencioni, and a lot of you will have heard of this model. I'm not generally a model person, but this is just one that has worked for me, and then I've got an example of how that's actually played out in the real world. So in terms of the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which is the basis for the Lencioni model, it is a pyramid based model, and it outlines the 5 key behaviours of a cohesive team. They're layered upwards from the base of the pyramid. So the base layer being trust, which Bernie was talking about, and that acts as the foundation upon which all the other values must sit upon. And without that trust, it essentially all falls over. And above there is positive conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. So really simple, almost cliched values. And effectively they are, but when the model is actually applied diagrammatically and a team unpacks what these values mean for them and some of the rhetoric that Lencioni puts behind each of the layers, and they help form some really honest, reflective discussion with whatever group you're working with. So the inverse pyramid, the upside down pyramid, illustrates the opposite of the 5 values, can also provide useful reflection. And and provides, I guess, a basis for robust and open formulation of team rules and ways of operating. So it's a simple, but it's also only one way of working, but that's effectively what models are. They give some structure, and they need to speak specifically to you and your unique situation to help bring your dreams to life as a team, really. A successful leadership team that I was a part of absolutely built an early foundation of that trust, and we used the Lencioni pyramid to formulate our ways of operating. We catered the values to our own specific needs. We agreed on our way of working as a group, and that included terms built on those within the pyramid, such as a one-team approach, mess it up and own it, disagree and commit, so that one voice beyond the door, and then having regular conversation, reflection on our values as a diverse group of leaders. We built a strong foundation of trust that allowed the team to hold each other to account respectfully, understand our own individual strengths, talk openly without that fear of retribution, remove competition, but most importantly, it helped us achieve some pretty cool things. The flip side of that is I've been a member of a leadership team which looked exactly the opposite, and effectively was the inverse pyramid, where dysfunction ruled and was kind of celebrated. The team had fun, but that was at the expense of others, of relationships, and was to the detriment of the entire organisation's effectiveness. It was only on really leaving that team that I reflected and could see that toxic environment that it had become. And interestingly enough, within 1 year of my departure of that team, the entire team had disbanded and left the organisation. It wasn't built on a solid foundation of trust, and everything fell away as a result. So interestingly enough, this team was really early in my leadership journey. I was I guess felt like the junior partner, and I felt I had to comply and had to fit in with that toxicity to succeed in the organisation. I couldn't really be me. We did all that usual profiling to figure out who we all were and how we like to operate. And that was telling enough in itself, because it showed I was the outlier. I was the only one who gained any energy from people, and I was the least dominant personality. But I guess what I'm saying is that is an amazing thing to reflect back on now, and I'm so thankful for that as an example, but also the positive example that I outlined earlier, because all these learnings can be used to help positively shape who you can become on your journey in the future.
Excellent, thank you. So we've gone from a pointy pyramid shape, and Alana's going to present something that's a completely different dynamic. So let's hear from you.
Yeah, wow. So this leadership thing, I feel like I've just been digging into it for 10 years or something, and the more I dig into it, the more it just goes deeper and deeper, and it's impossible to completely define. But what's really come out of it for me is feeling like leadership is not a role, it's not a person, it's not just holding certain power, it's actually a function in human groups. It's that force that gets people going in the same direction, that enables people to achieve more together than they can on their own. The sort of opposite of entropy. Entropy being just everybody going off in their own direction and nothing getting done, basically. And so that force doesn't have to be inherent to a person or a role. It can be looked at in so many different ways and show up in so many different ways. And I have developed a lot of tools, so technology tools that help work in this way. Structure, like company structures and cooperatives and those kinds of tools, and then also some conceptual models about leadership to just mostly started to help me explore and to try to figure out what is this thing that's so hard to pin down. So I mentioned briefly Full Circle Leadership, which talks about 8 types of leadership. All of the stuff, I just put it all out for free on the internet. So if you're interested in it, check it out. And another model that I came up with is called How to Grow Distributed Leadership. And it's basically, okay, so we're not going to do the thing where we have a boss at the top who just tells everybody what to do. But then if we're not doing that, if there's no ladder to climb, what does leadership development actually look like? What does leadership capacity building look like in a shared cooperative model? And I came up with these 4 layers. I can't get into all the details now, but basically it starts with self-leadership. It talks about leading others in a really facilitative, bottom-up servant leadership way that a couple other people have mentioned here. But that's just the first 2 layers. Then comes leading leaders, which is about really building up the capacity of all the leaders around you, because ultimately the goal in this model is, if you're really good at this kind of leadership, you will actually make yourself obsolete. The goal is, people don't need me. It's not all leaning on me as a person. It's actually woven into the processes and the structures and the culture of how we do things. And then the final level of that I call ecosystem leadership, which is about how can organizations network with other organizations, and how can we have this much bigger conversation about transforming our ideas of leadership to tackle some of the really big issues in our society about how power works, how do we, empower different kinds of people, diversity, take on some really important questions about oppression and how our society functions that are based on this, I would say, outmoded idea of leadership as there's a boss that tells everyone what to do.
Excellent. Nice reference to the box, because I feel as though from this conversation that we're having now, and in fact over the whole summit, we're going to be, as the programming team and the people who are hosting the summit, we're going to be pulling together a whole lot of tools and resources and putting them on the Whisper Hub so that you can go and find all of these things. So I'll be following up with the panel and getting all of their great ideas, but you should be able to do some Googling yourself and follow that up. Now, we've still got two people to hear from in terms of models. So let's hear from you, Jo, and then Hannah.
Thanks, Robin. So my model isn't so much a model, but a kind of mantra, and that starts with M, so it's kind of the same, isn't it? And that is, I guess I have been lucky to do a lot of leadership development and have been in both formal and informal roles. And there's one lesson that took me a long time to learn, and it is the most simple lesson, but yet a very hard one, and that is be yourself. And now that is so easy to say, but in some ways it's so hard to do, because there is so much, if you're in a formal role, there's so much expectations either on you, or I think we put on ourselves about who a leader should be. And it was a very hard lesson for me to realise that actually these jobs are hard, particularly when they get, even as you progress, they get even more complex and more difficult. If you're trying to be somebody else, it's nearly impossible to be successful. It's kind of like, imagine acting on a stage all day, and it's incredibly difficult. So I would say my mantra is, if you can find your leadership self, if that means as early as you can in your career, you'll be more successful. Because it's pretty darn tough to try and be someone else, or to live up to some expectation, or probably even live up to some expectation that you're probably setting for yourself about what a leader is and who a leader should be. And then when I did become, I guess, comfortable in my leadership skin, and I say that like it's an end point, it's not, it's a journey. And Hannah, I would say I'm an emerging leader. There's no end point, here. And but what I've come to realize is that I do, and even to say these words out loud feels a wee bit uncomfortable. I have a superpower, and I know everybody does. But when you start to go, oh, I really do have something, and it's not necessarily a sexy thing. I'm incredibly pragmatic, which means I want the ideas that are on the whiteboard to get into action, and that piece around how can we turn this into action? Because that's where I actually get a lot of my rewards, seeing things and the communities and environments and the world around me change. And they don't change because we sat and wrote a plan, and they don't change because we had a great planning meeting and put some words on a whiteboard. So that's my little piece. But sometimes I feel at the superpower convention quite lonely, because this kind of sense of pragmatic, let's get it done, or perhaps that how do we turn ideas into action isn't a sexy bit of leadership, but I actually think it should be. So that's my bit as well. How I put that into practice, I guess, is because at the moment I run my own consultancy, so I am the mistress of my own success and failure. There's nobody I can blame, not that I would want to do that anyway. So I choose how I use my days, who I work with, what work I take on, and how I've created my portfolio, which is the ultimate leadership, because I'm leading myself through that. And so I set goals every year for myself, and I make them very simple and pragmatic. So I have a goal for learning. This is the sense of that, what am I investing in that I will be able to contribute next year? So that's my emerging piece, Hannah. I'm continually going, what am I going to learn? The other one is for finances. I'm a business, I've got to pay, I'm running a business. What is my financial goal for the year? And I think many of us aren't bold enough and brave enough to make that and talk about that and put it in our goals, but we need to because that is about how we generate, well-being for our families and our communities as well. I also then have one for delivery. What am I going to deliver or focus on in my delivery or my work that is going to make the most difference? And I have an idea for that. And then I have a life goal, and it usually involves make it to the gym a week. And I'm happy to confess that is the one that I'm least likely to succeed at and needs more work, which is a very dangerous thing to do in a sport-based webinar. But there you go. Leadership is about courage as well, my friends. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you, Jo. And let's hear from you, Hannah, your model.
Thank you. So my model is a combination of two. So it's role models and mentoring. So a lot of the people that I ask to be mentors are actually my role models, and I see that they are great leaders and I want to be able to emulate what they're doing. But when talking about mentoring, I guess there's value in both formal mentoring and informal mentoring. So I've had both in the past and it's been really helpful. I guess formal arrangements can have a bit more structure and you can try and get a little bit more development and progress out of them. But I've also come across a lot of informal mentors in my life. So these are people around me who are supporting me, and I never realized that they were mentors until afterwards. And I think it's really valuable to have these people there that you can ask questions, you can reflect on different things with them, you can learn from them and get different perspectives. Quite often I've sort of come across a challenge and then I've wanted to talk to a mentor about it. And so I've had mentors for different things. I've had mentors for work, mentors for leadership, mentors for governance. And I think it's really valuable to be seeking out these people and these people that you can see as role models and emulate what they are doing.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Some great examples. We've got 6 minutes left, so we're going to really cut to the chase now, following your good suggestion, Jo. What I'd like you to do, panellists, is to describe one strategy that you have used, participated in, or know about that is increasing diversity and inclusion in leadership. So you're just going to have to shrink your action down to one thing. And Hannah, I'm going back to you. What's one thing that you would recommend we do? On mute.
Sorry about that. So for me, as my role with Generate, is intergenerational dialogue and intergenerational connections. So creating that diversity in organisations, committees, boards, having people there that bring a fresh perspective and are also there to learn. Within Generate, we've been doing that. So we've been creating a platform within the sport and recreation industry to voice the opinions of young professionals. And there's a lot of young females that are very ambitious, which is great. And I sort of wonder, is that because we feel like we have to work harder to be great leaders? So that is kind of one of my questions is, where are the young men? What are they doing? Is it just women trying to work harder to be better leaders?
Let's hear from a man. Yeah, Andrew.
I don't know if I'm a young man anymore. I guess I want to refer to Sport Waikato, and it's more about the future. And Sport Waikato is going through a huge transformation at the moment in terms of who we are and what we do. A really interesting and tough time, but with some clarity on the end goal and on the future. And I guess when I think of inclusion and diversity through that process, it's going to be what we actually need in the future in this organisation to deliver on our strategic desires and what our insights are telling us that we need to be to actually meet our community needs. So that's, I guess, the piece that's on my mind at the moment in this space.
Kia ora. Bernie.
Currently, still in community sport, 58% of our staffing are females, and we're really quite proud of that, and females as young as 21 and mature females. And I guess our approach really is just to be purposeful in terms of our recruitment, both locally within our organisation as well as board representation. We have 43% female representation on our board. Senior management, we have over 50% in terms of our wider community leisure management facility as well. So we're really quite proud of that fact. I think the challenge for us really lies in the diverse representations within the communities, particularly sports organisations and clubs within our region, in terms of representation on those boards and within the committee settings. And even more so around ethnic representation with Māori and Pacific, particularly being the bigger demographics within the County Manukau region.
Thank you, Bernie. Jo, let's hear from you.
Thanks. I am lucky enough to do most of my consulting work in the diversity and inclusion space, and I'm starting to see some trends over the last few months that are a bit worrying. Many of our organisations and our leaders have said that this matters, that having the best people, being able to bring them whole self, having a connection to our communities really matters and are key to our business. But when time gets tough and funding gets short, I think we're going to see de-investment in leadership development. It will potentially be seen as a nice to do. Obviously, I don't think our leaders will say that overtly, but just watching your organisations that where the fat is being cut, and I guarantee it is in some of those people initiatives. So there is a risk that all the amazing work that we've done across the sector, across many sectors, will be unwound very quickly over the next 18 months if we don't actually see that it is part of creating performance in an organisation. Research from the last time many of our organisations were under pressure, the GFC, in sort of 2009, 2010 showed that that's exactly what happened. We slowly took the pedal off our targets and our ambition in this space, and what happened? Things slid back very quickly. So if any of you are in organisations, just keep a watching eye and just ask your leaders or lead forward. COVID recovery depends on the best people. Managing through a recession means we've got to have talent. We've got to be developing talent. It isn't a nice to have. And so let's keep going, I would guess is my key message. I would want pom-poms and cheerleading to say that.
Excellent. And Alana, you've got some transformative approaches. Let's hear from you briefly.
Yeah, a little while back, I was invited to speak at a conference overseas, and I wasn't able to go. Got young children and a lot of other reasons. And so I said, oh, well, why don't you take my co-founder of the thing that they wanted to hear about? And they said, oh, no, well, he's a man and we're doing terrible with the gender balance in speakers at our conference. So we really wanted you to come. And I said, oh, well, why don't you take my awesome colleague? She's great. You should have her speak. And they were like, oh, we only want to hear from the founders. And I was like, do I be polite? No. Okay, listen. If you want to fix gender balance of the speakers at your conference, maybe you are looking at the wrong problem. Maybe you actually need to rethink your whole definition of leadership, rethink the definition of who is worth hearing to, broaden out who gets to be a leader, who gets to get that spotlight on them so that we can diversify the voices that we actually hear from. Because actually my colleague is awesome and she is a leader and she's a founder in her own right. And they went, okay. And so she went and she did a great job and they loved her. So I guess that would be my point, is that broaden out your definition of leadership. Know that there are people around you who you don't currently think are leaders who actually are. And there are people who can develop as leaders, but they don't want to be that necessarily that person, that boss, that person on the stage necessarily. There are other ways to do it. And that's the diversity we're going to need to solve the big problems that we're confronting in our world.
Excellent. Thank you. What a great way to finish. That's us done. The questions that people generated, we're going to weave them in to the workshop that will happen later on this afternoon and as part of the networking. So thank you for that. Just remember, this is change in action. So what are you going to do to take a lead? Where are you going to show up in terms of your organisation? How are you going to encourage more diverse leadership? And what tools are you going to apply in your context? A round of thanks to all of the panel members. You've been fantastic, and I'm taking away a lot of information from this. So thank you. I think we can all just imagine, people clapping and cheering and stamping. But back to our co-hosts in the studio.